Like,
disciplinary, right?
yeah.
Right. I think I was getting to that. It's forever changing for me. And after hearing you guys today, too, it kind of confirmed some of that I'm going through. I did start with Liam, my oldest, a little bit more, stern like my mom. Was like, no, this is it, this is that. You don't do this, you don't do that. This is bad, and this is good. But he has always been a good kid. He never misbehaved in that regards. But when he was like 3 years old, and I call him Ted. I mean, my kid kind of like timeline's kind of off. You have terrible two. I don't. With Liam, I have more like a terrible three, maybe. And he briefly about I would say 6 months or so, he was very misbehaved. When he started to talk, when he started to do more activity on himself, by himself, I mean. Um, and then that's where the disciplinary happened, where the spanking did happen with him. But I think because of I did that, it worked with him. He become more self-disciplined and understand what's right and wrong. What are the things that I guess when I say right and wrong is daddy considered right and wrong, and I learned that very important. For me, that I learned that now. What he defined right and wrong at the time was my idea of that, right? My perception of that. And as Liam out now at 6 is going to school, learn from friends and teacher at school. His he is more himself. I- I'm 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 very proud of that, right? And in terms of decision making, instead of hey, this is what daddy thinks, right? He's more like, oh, daddy, that's not right, or daddy, this is not good, right? Or what he's thinking, it doesn't mean he's right, but he has his own opinion now. And I'm glad that what I did when he was 3 years old, more spanking with him, doesn't really, in what I meant is like in terms of abuse level, right? Doesn't leave any mark on him in terms that affect how he thinks, how he grow, and how he see the world. But because of that, I have a better version of Liam growing up, right? So in my opinion, spanking is still very effective method, right? But it's have to be at a certain level because I get that fear now, and I'm thinking back that did I do too much that was scarred him in that regard, right? Um, so so I would say that that's something that I've reflected upon, and I try to do better with Luca, right? But unfortunately, my second is pretty a handful. I don't know if that's a saying at my workplace because I have asked a couple dad at my workplace, like including my superiors as well, and um, they seem to have very similar response as far as they call it COVID baby, right? The
Yep.
babies you're born, you're in COVID time, and they
Yep.
all have very similar uh, characteristic, I would call it, right? Like very hyper, very misbehaved, right, in a lot of ways, as a very young age, right? So that's where I see that with Luca, and I kind of blame COVID for that. But with him a little bit early on in terms of disciplinary, he can't even speak yet fully, but he understands very well. But he already know how to do bad things, right? So it's a
Yeah.
forever changing for me how I discipline my kid, and it definitely doesn't work with Luca. So I'm working
Okay.
on some other method right now, and something today that I could bring back.
Okay. Awesome. There was one thing, and I forgot about it. Sorry. You're having a third, right?
Yeah, I am actually.
And it's due soon or soonish.
I do August 25th, so it's
Okay.
around the corner, right? 2 weeks from now, and it's all fair game. So
All
Do
right.
you know boy,
yeah,
girl?
Oh well,
Or a surprise?
unfortunately, fortunately, is a boy. It's not a boy, right? So, but
That's why I remembered because Brian was saying it's different for boys and girls, but he has
Oh
right,
all
yeah.
boys.
you're right. So I don't get to choose that anymore. Well, this is our last attempt, right? I mean, my wife really wanted a daughter, and I'm a little bit indifferent, but I grew to wanting a daughter as well because my wife convinced me to have a third one, right? I mean, well, she convinced me to have a second one after sticking it out for 4 years and a half, and I couldn't do it no more. That she convinced me again to have a third one. So I grew into wanting a daughter very much, but it's not our plan. It's not what we have as a plan for us. So we're gonna stick with it. We have three boys, and we're gonna spend our time, grow them, teach them to be a great man, to support and be part of this society. So
How old is your second?
my second is 2.5 right now. So
You got your
turning
hands
3.
full.
Yeah,
Yep,
no, exactly.
yep.
So
Are your in-laws still staying with you?
what is it?
Are your in-laws still staying with you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
both of my father and mother-in-law are staying with us and helping us with our kid as well. So
Okay.
super appreciative of that. I would say I got lucky. I for me, is growing up is taking care of your parents is part of it, right?
Yeah.
It's never a responsibility or duty in my perspective. Same for my wife. She's the only child, so when I marry her. Well, when I dated her and decided to date her for a long time and then marry her, I knew what I signed up for, right? And then I'm willing to do that.
Oh
So
man, I didn't know she was
um,
the only child. I know
she
she had
is
a
the
bit.
only child.
I know she had like a huge family, but those are all cousins. It's like, oh,
That's
okay.
yeah. She grew up with them, so they're like a brother to her. So she did have her mom's sister have all four boys. So maybe that's
Run,
what happening to me, right?
runs in the family.
It run in the family here. But
Okay.
Is
So,
your wife also Vietnamese?
no, she a Laotian.
Does that make it different for your parenting style? Like if
Um, well,
culturally speaking? Because I don't
I
know a
don't
lot
think
about
so.
that. Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's very similar in a way. You know, from how both countries are in terms of disciplinary, as I say, because I learned from my wife that growing up, spanking is also part of the equation, regardless you are boy or girl, right? So, and that happened with her too. Does it work? I don't know. To say it worked later on, you start to appreciate those spankings. And that's what I say to my mom now. Uh, right? That's what I did say. I did
Yeah.
not appreciate those when it happened. But now thinking back, I was like, wow, man, thanks, mom. Without you, I would have been, you know.
Heard.
Yeah, exactly.
it's like
So,
those Asian. It's like an Asian thing, I think.
right,
Most Asians. I don't know about Indian, but I think most Asians seem to be that way.
right.
Long, I wanted to get into uh, a question you told me
Yeah.
about
Oh, yeah, that's right.
a couple days ago. So
Yeah.
your question when you phrased it to me was you told me that Liam was a very sensitive kid. I think that was the word you used. So
Mhm.
he's very friendly. He's very I don't know if he's soft spoken or not, but that's just the characteristic I would put to it. But
Mhm.
he's very friendly. I don't know if you're afraid of people taking advantage of him, but I think other dads can relate to that. So your concern was getting him ready for me, getting my kid ready for like pre-K, and then obviously Liam's in a higher grade already. But how do you get him ready for other kids that have parents that have different discipline
Mhm.
styles or no discipline at all,
Best.
and also potential predators out there?
Mhm.
And how do you deal with that? And Brian, we kind of went into that rabbit hole in our social media
Yeah.
podcast. So did I phrase that right? Is that the right question?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it is. I totally forgot about that as we ongoing with our this topic. But yeah, I mean that you mentioned it right, Van. Liam is a little bit more sensitive in that regard. He's not. I mean, he's very well spoken. I mean, he I think he have a confidence in terms of social life. I would say his social skill is pretty good. That's what I'm getting at, and he's not shy in that regard. He loves to make friends, and he very outspoken. However, he are very super sensitive in terms of receiving comment, right? And sense of inclusive. So the slight moment when he realized that he being excluded or not being waiting for or not being included, he become very emotional and to the point where it's hard for him to further function or participate, and it caused him to withdraw, right, from those. Um, I experienced some of that with him going through pre-Ks and kindergartens as well. I think it's a symptom of being at home, right? You are still a sociable person as a personality, but you have a hard time dealing with emotion when it comes to level of tolerance, right? That's what I call it in terms of bullying, right? I mean, and I mentioned to you, you probably hear a lot in college. So, my time in high school, right? I was bullied, right? That's not something that I want to talk about that much publicly, right? Um, but I would say the first 2 years of my high school after I came to America, was were full of injustice, I would call it now, right? Um, there's a lot of racism happen, and there's a lot of bullying because of my colors and how I look, how much I weigh, my hairstyle, how I talk, my accents, right? There's a lot of that. So I guess part of that becomes a trauma for me, right? Knowing that I am sending my kid to the very same war that I potentially, um, drop on when I first came to America. So, so I guess, seeing that, I was like kind of catching up to me now. It's like, okay, you know, is it different here in Minnesota when compared to my time in Washington, D.C.? I hope it is, but I starting to see some of that right with my own eye here. So how do I deal with that? How do I prepare my kid? Should I put the trust? I mean, that's Brian. That's what you're saying. When you send them out into the world and the trust and their ability to be kind and handle the stress of the work. But I have a hard time of putting that trust right out there, and I'm constantly trying to prepare my kid. Like anything happen, this and this and that. But I also don't have I'm not too confident on the Liam ability to defend himself or speak up or anything like that. So that's kind of become that's the part where discipline is not part of the equation anymore, right?
Yeah.
So what do you got?
Oh,
Yeah.
I can tell you, like I have the oldest kid here. Um, and my boy is actually sensitive as well, but he deals with it differently. And um part of it's just his personality. Like he's a weird kid. He is like he's just very driven. Like Van knows him. He's had the same goal since he was 5, right? He wants to be an Olympian and he's taking active steps towards that. I believe that you have to give your kid like enough leeway to figure out how to handle it themselves. However, that doesn't mean that you send them out unprepared. Um, I feel pretty strongly about this, and I know some people will disagree with it, but that's cool, and people can. you're not like, nobody will change my mind on this. I think that some kind of combat sport for boys specifically is very valuable. Like if you want to do karate, I think karate is okay. Like I did karate like for a long time. It's changed a lot since I was a kid. Like they're no long. It's softer now, like a better term. I think wrestling like is incredibly valuable for kids because it teaches them to be mentally and physically tough. So my kid, like all three of my kids have wrestled. My oldest one has been wrestling for 7 years. Yeah. So I mean he's 13, he's been wrestling since he was 5. And he's a tough kid. Like he's a physically tough kid. I wrestled with him the other day, and I struggled to get away from him. And he's, I'm double his size, and he's just very strong. But he's also very dedicated. So I think having a combat sport is helpful, not necessarily so they like it just gives them the confidence. Like if somebody is being a butt, okay, like I can handle this. And my son is short. I'm not super tall. Like my kid is the second or third shortest kid in his class. That being said, he's doesn't really get picked on for it because he's not like really an alpha because he doesn't care enough. Like I think in order to like be an alpha dude, like you have to care and want to be a leader. He doesn't really care about that because he has his goals and like, so I guess more of a sigma if you want to like go that way, where he's like very cool being the leader and comfortable. Like, hey, like if you guys want to do that, that's cool. And if they're like, well, no, we're not going to do that, he's like, well, that's what I'm going to do. And I think wrestling has really helped him with that because he's just not scared of anybody. And if someone's mean to him, like he's just like, he just doesn't, he's like, that's cool, bro. He's like, you can go be a wiener to somebody else. Or he's very, very quick to correct people that bully, which has gotten him in trouble. Like, I'm not gonna lie, like he's had some interactions with teachers where someone's being a bit of a bully and he's just not tolerant of it. Or he's had some interactions where people have tried to bully him and he's kindly, without like hitting them, but physically restraining them, put them in their place. As a dad, there's times where I'm like, hey buddy, that's inappropriate. As a man, I'm like, dude, that's hilarious. Like you just made like he pinned a kid to the yeah, like he pinned a kid to the ground and he said some like unkind things to that kid. He's like, hey, if I wanted you, yeah, make you do whatever I want, basically, but a little
Brian,
more flavorful.
Brian, let's put some context on it. Your kid has been called the, I don't know, mini Hulk multiple
Baby
times,
Hulk. Yeah, he's
baby
been
Hulk multiple
yeah,
times. I mean, he's ripped as far as I'm concerned. He's
yeah.
probably finished one or two in all of his kind of wrestling tournaments.
He
So
does
this kid,
well.
I mean, I have never wrestled and he'd probably like break my arm or something. So
Yeah.
Or he could put you to sleep, right?
yeah, I mean,
He's
he'd probably put me to sleep.
he's incredibly strong. I mean, like
But
he's highly ranked in Olympic weightlifting. Like so, like paint the picture of this kid. Like he works out for 3 hours a day, 6 days a week right now. Like that's just what
Wow.
he does. So and he's highly ranked. I think he's like he just went to nationals and he podiumed at nationals. He didn't win, but he podiumed for Olympic weightlifting. He just started wrestling with high schoolers. He's 13, but he's wrestling up with high schoolers and he's not winning all the time, but he's not losing either. And this is club wrestling, so the kids are pretty good. So he's a tough kid. Like he's he started boxing because he's like his exact words like, Dad, I need to be able to round out my skill set just in case. Like that's the kind of kid he is, and he protects his sisters pretty stringently. And his mother and I are separated, and he's takes in that role of I'll take care of mom if I need, which I respect. Like I think he should. Like he definitely is a very strong young man. He's got a good head on his shoulders. He's not a bully. So that being said, I understand he's a little bit different, but I think that having the wrestling and starting when he was little, I think really helped. Because he's just not tolerant. Like he's very much willing to speak his mind. Like they had, and I don't know how anybody feels about like the whole, anybody can use any bathroom thing. Like he had that at school, and they had a teacher that was monitoring because kids were vaping in the bathroom. And it was as a lady teacher in the doorway, and he was like, "Excuse me, I need you to leave." And she gave him a little bit of attitude, and he was like, "Get out." And it was just very firm. He's like, "Listen," he's like, "I'm not going to vape." He's like, "But I don't know that you're not a pedophile, so get out." Um, and as soon as you call a teacher a pedophile, they get out. I found out, and then you get a conversation with them about your
Yep.
kid. Um, he's called a couple people that. Um, but it's, that's just how he is. So I do think that giving them a sport I think that's helpful because it builds confidence in their physical ability. I know not every kid can do that. So if you have a kid that can't, I think there are other solutions. Um, but I would say I know in Minnesota, wrestling for kids is great. They actually have a no cry rule, so it's actually a better environment. If your kid cries, it's just done. Like the match is done, and that way you're not just worried about your kid getting just beat on.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool. It does make the kids in Minnesota tougher because they don't want to lose from crying. So then you'll see them crying, but without sound, which is super funny. Um, but it's a good program. The key though is if you want to put your kid into a sport like that, they just have to know it hurts. Like kids go in there and like, oh, I'm gonna wrestle like I wrestle with dad. That's not the case. Like it can be if you wrestled and like I wrestled my kids kind of hard. But I think having that and having them understand, hey, like wrestling hurts the whole time. Like it does. Like from the time that you start wrestling till the time that you're done, and even after where you're disgusting, it hurts. And having them understand that and like persevere through it, I think really helps them be confident. My middle does it, did it for a year and she did not love it. So she quit after a year. She's like, Dad, this isn't for me. I don't like when people touch me. I respect that. She's pretty tough though. She boxes, like she just started boxing this year. And so my 8-year-old has been wrestling almost a full year at this point. She wrestles year round with her brother. So I would say if you're worried and you got a kid that's a little bit sensitive, like look at a sport that pushes them, that's like physically pushes them and don't wrestling does mentally push you because if you're playing checkers when you should be playing chess, like you lose. I'm not gonna lie to you. Um, but I think that has really helped my son, which has then helped his sisters because he's kind of hard on them as well. Um, and the girls are different 100%. Because dudes, like, we can have an argument and be like, hey, like, and then we're cool, right? Like I can have an argument with one of my guy friends and we can just be like, you're a dick. And we can both agree that we were both being butts, and then all of a sudden we're cool. It doesn't work out with girls. No, I don't know why. It just doesn't. So girls are harder, in my opinion. Um, but they're also very confident because they're physically like in pretty good physical shape. So I think that helps. But I think I think boys are easier.
Yeah, for me, I was gonna give it to you, Brian, because you have the older ones. I was gonna say
Mhm.
I don't worry about that quite yet. I think Long and Brian, you bring up similarities to Jace. Um, Long especially like when right now Jace changed over like 6 months. He did not want to be by anybody. He just if Brian you walked up on the street, he'd run the other way to us. Today he'd run straight up to you and just like pat you on the leg. And it's like, what the heck are you doing? Uh, but like now we have like neighbors that go out on their patio and he'll run up into their circle and just like take
Mhm.
things and then just stay there. So there's a little bit of a concern there where he's just running up to strangers.
Mhm.
So uh, he when he's excluded from that, I yeah, I could see that he have a similar response like Liam, where,
Mhm.
oh, I can't be a part of that. I want to be a part of that. That's where all the action is and stuff like that. So I definitely think that's something that we're probably gonna have to think about too. As he continues to get older, but that's not necessarily where I would say my main concern is. If he was going off to school, I think my main concern in terms of kind of predators or physical situations would be my wife.
Mhm.
And with her being from Vietnam and her not knowing a whole lot of the slang or the things that typically go on in American society, that's where my main concern would be. And I think Brian, you bring up a good, I don't know if it's a topic or not, but for your lessons that you want to have for your daughters, you always want them to have some sort of physical training of some kind so they're prepared. And that's something I would want for my wife. And I think if Jace grows up and be that protector for his mom, great. But I need to be confident to let my wife go out somewhere by herself. So I would also recommend. I don't know if there's other alternatives, but I would recommend something physical for her, and I think boxing would be in there. I don't know, karate. I don't know if that's something that we would do, but something in that realm.
I mean,
But
I think if we're going down a rabbit hole, so I like the rabbit hole though. If you want to be proficient, so like if you want to protect yourself, and you're looking at like hand-to-hand combat kind of deals, there's only three that are, well, technically you could argue four, but I think it's three that are super useful to normal people, and that would be boxing, wrestling, Muay Thai. Like those are the three that will teach you how to actually like, really kind of hurt people, like a better term. I
what
mean, like
about
the sport component
what
is a
about a
little bit different.
typical self-defense class? Is that not useful?
It depends on where you go. I mean, locally, you tell me where you want to go, and all the guys that teach it, and I'll tell you if they're going to give you what you need. Krav Maga can be if it's taught by someone who's not like a sport Krav Maga guy, where they're like, hey, like I'm going to teach you how to break somebody. But that's a little bit different. So that's the fourth one you can argue. But I've also known some guys locally that teach it where I'm just not confident that they would be able to protect themselves. Um, Otherwise, like there's self-defense tools if you're super worried, then other training that you can do for that too.
Okay.
So, but I
Well,
would say
go ahead, Brian.
boxing is not that far from where you live.
Right, but we're not staying.
Yeah, that's true.
Uh, long, I guess I would
Yeah.
say, do you have any follow-up? Otherwise, we'll get into the last question.
No, I think not much follow-up. No, I appreciate it, Brian and Van, for what you guys experiences and as well as advice. I think we thought about that with Liam as well and kind of trying to get him into sport, something physical. Um, I took Taekwondo in Vietnam for about, I would say, 2 years, not much as a young age. I did build confidence. I would say that, right? But um, the one thing which you mentioned at the end there, Brian, is depend who teach them, right? And my master, I would call him, right, or sensei, uh, whatever they call him at the time, I can't remember. In Vietnamese term for bad words was um, is not the right type of teacher or coach, and that could have lead me to better discipline and as well as advance my skills right through that and kind of discourage me from even ongoing continue. That and it was important. It taught me. I mean, I was kind of old enough to see the bad and the good,
Mhm.
and not learning from those behavior. But I can't say the same. I put my 5 years old into you know, a combat sport, and the coach is the blame, right?
Look at wrestling.
Right. That's the part where that's something that not only the sport, but probably have to know the right person who will give your kid, because they will be the one to interact with your kid and tell them the right and the wrong at the moment, right? And you want them to have the right story to tell what they mean by right and wrong, and not like in a bad situation, right? Or just in a non situation, someone's not even trying to hurt you and you still react. that same way, right? I don't want that,
Yeah.
right? Karate Kid, right? Want that movie, for example, right? But it's in real life, I experienced that, and I don't want that for my kids, right? So, but yeah, no, I think that's all good advice, and we'll take it from that as well.
Yeah. If you want the wrestling thing, you email me. I'll help you.
Yeah,
I
I
know some
think
guys up there.
I should look into that now.
Yeah. That starts probably October-ish
So yeah,
is when the season starts.
okay. I think his schools, he goes to Rose Creek, also offer a program in there, but I
Mhm.
think it's for like kid that like second grade or third grade. I have to check into it, but we did look into it at one time, but I think we want to try something outside first to get some going before getting to school tournament or something like that. So, but
All right. Well, Long, we
yeah,
kind of want to showcase you here, so we'll kind of leave the stage to you, and kind of whatever message you want to give to dads out there, or whatever your final message will be.
um, I would say to all the dad out there, just being there for your kid, right? That in my opinion, right? To be part of their life, and be your best. Try, try is the right word. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. I make tons of mistakes being a dad, right? And I grow from it. I learn from it. Your kid will forgive you. Your kid will teach you how to be a better dad as well. So that's the part where I leave it at, because I'm still learning myself. I'm still developed to be the dad that I never had, and I don't, and I start to stop using that as an excuse, and truly being there for my kid, and letting them know that doesn't matter what, no matter what, I'm always going to be here, and I'm always going to be part of their life, and be the number one supporter, next to their mom, right? I can't forget that, right? So that's my message.